Jim, are you back?
I'm with you. You're good.
Okay. All right, great. Let's see here. Check this out. Okay, Lee, thank you for your message there.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay, we'll go ahead and get started here today. Let's see here. Do something here. Okay, welcome to February meeting of the DPEAG. My efforts with this is try to get as many people as possible on the same page, at being three main groups: the FSDO, the examiners, and the instructors, both associated with schools and the independents. And I hope that this is working towards that effort right there. So we'll start off with our agenda. It's going to be comments from the last meeting, DMS. We're going to review some things on aircraft documents. I was hoping that Ernie would be here, but I don't think he's on yet, or may not be here today. We're going to talk about operations at non-towered airports regarding what we're looking for in the ACS. Flight deck management, engine starting. These are all ACS direct areas. Jim's going to talk about the Zoom registration. We're going to have a new way of doing these meetings where I'm not going to have to send anything out to you. And he'll explain how that's going to work, so you'll be able to just on your own log into these meetings. We'll talk about some scenarios and best practices, the point of contact reports, and I'm going to cover Chapter 9, the supplement section of the POH and AFMs, which probably aren't looked at very much, if at all. A lot of people don't realize what's actually in there, but they actually have some valid information that we want to be aware of. Any comments from the last meeting? Okay. Any DMS issues? I see Craig is on there, so I'm not familiar with that system. So if there's anything that anyone has, maybe Craig can help us out.
Been working good for me, and I've had a few activities both at work and in the DPE world, so I can't say that it's been cumbersome lately.
Okay. All right. Anyone else? Okay, just reviewing aircraft documents. We talked about the airworthiness certificate, registration certificate, and the data plate in the last meeting, and we talked about the process of getting those replaced. Not the data plate, of course, but the airworthiness certificate. And let me just take a look here. I don't believe Ernie, you're not on there, are you? No. Ernie was going to check in for me, to let me know how we would be able to get those replacements done with the situation the way the FSDO is right now. Craig, you weren't involved in any of that, were you?
No, but I'm shooting Ernie the meeting information. He didn't have it, so he'll be out in a couple minutes.
Oh, okay. All righty. He must have fallen out on the email. Okay, well, we'll get to that one in a second. Okay, going to begin with operations at non-towered airports. Now, I know that, a lot of the training is done at towered airports, and many times just a few landings may be done at different airports, and then primarily operating at the airport with a tower. This is an item, one of the elements in the ACS for both private and commercial that has operations at towered and non-towered airports. So it is something that we need to look at once in a while. And some of the things I wanted to cover here is that are we exposing the students to the non-towered airports and actually training them on the process of getting in and out of there, as opposed to just going in and out of there and having the instructor telling them what to do? Are they actually getting any training on how you operate in and out of them, and the advisory circulars that are associated with that? So, if possible, it'd be great if the flight test could include a landing at an airport under these conditions where the examiner could get a chance to see how they operate. remember that as soon as we sign somebody off for their private pilot certificate, we've given them authority to do a lot of things. Land basically at any airport that will allow their aircraft, and also Bravo airspace, even though they may have never been given a Bravo endorsement or even flown through it with their instructor for any type of training whatsoever. So we got to remember that as soon as we sign that certificate, they're actually allowed to head into these places all by themselves. And we're hoping that they had the correct training and the references to see how this works. So we have, the biggest question I get is, how do I enter the pattern? So for both the CFIs and the DPEs here, we have two ways. You notice it says preferred entry when crossing, and the other one is alternate midfield entry. Obviously, the traffic is going to determine one or the other. I like the fact that they prefer the overhead with the 270 back around as the main option to do this. But also you can just come in at pattern altitude and go ahead on downwind. And that, of course, is going to be based on the traffic. And once again, non-towered airports, nobody has to talk, even if you do have a radio. So we want to make sure they understand what their options are for getting in there. So one of the things we're still dealing with, still here on the radio, traffic in the area, please advise. This is right out of the AIM, and it's also out of the advisory circular 90-66, which is the operations at non-towered airports. So we want to keep in mind that this is not supposed to be used. It tells you right there, it's not recognized and should not be used under any conditions. So pretty emphatic, they don't want you to do that. And for those of you that may be wondering why that is, if you're counting on somebody saying where they are in the pattern, they may not have a radio, and they may choose not to talk on the radio. So you're under the false impression that there isn't anyone else there. So we want to be careful about utilizing that. It's us talking and looking is primarily what we want to be doing. Hang on a second here. Let me do something.
Hey, Phil.
Yes, there you are.
That is a spectacular reference point, and it is systemic across the country. I hear it everywhere now, not just in our practice areas, and et cetera. And I'm even hearing professional level pilots using it. We were flying into over one of the ski cities and was monitoring the frequency and was listening to a pilot on the guard frequency, making CTAF calls on guard. Of course, the minute he let go of the microphone, he got the avalanche of "you're on guard." But use that unpreferred phraseology, and we're the standard bearers, flight instructors and examiners, to nip this in the bud. And I think you're going to talk about some of the other really poorly used phrases in our two-way communications out there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Anyone else have a comment regarding that? Okay, so along those lines, that's not what we want to be saying. We want to be listening and looking. So there's been plenty of times that Ak-Chin is one of the most common airports down here in the south side, where we also have the ultralights that are operating down there that may or may not have radios on them, utilizing the dirt runway, which is parallel to the paved runway. So we have that traffic as well. So we basically want to be looking as well as listening to make sure that we're seeing all the traffic. So how do we determine the landing runway? What are we looking for with an applicant to determine the landing runway? Well, what we get most of the time is, well, they're using runway 4. Well, who's using runway 4? Well, the guy in the pattern is using 4. Well, yeah, but the winds are favoring 2-2. But he's using runway 4, and I've heard more than not, I've heard the applicant/students say, well, I don't want to create a problem by going the opposite direction. So I said, so you're going to land with a tailwind. What are your other options? And they've never really been taught what to do when the person is using a runway that's not really coincident with the winds. And I said, simply, stay out of the pattern for a period of time and announce that as soon as that aircraft is done landing, you're going to land on whatever runway it is, 22, due to the winds. If you want to throw the reason in there. Remember, the pilot in command is the one that determines the runway. Or if you want to call it the active runway, there's really, the active runway is whichever runway is used by the pilot. There's really no taxi to the active runway. The runway is whichever one you choose to use, or whichever one the tower is using at the time. So one of the things that we need to get across to them or evaluate is how do they determine a landing runway? And unfortunately, we're going to find more than not that they're saying, well, the other guys are landing on 5 or the other guys are landing on 4. So I'm going to do that. But what is it we're really looking for? We want to see if they can check the winds either by visual indicators or an ASOS or an AWOS, and then make the determine at that point. And just because the aircraft is using a specific runway doesn't mean it's the best or safest choice. So this is the first thing that I usually ran into with operating at the non-towered airport. So once again, the PIC will determine the runway of landing based on available information. And if it means not landing there because the traffic is just not going to play nice, they're going to set you up for an opportunity to make a mistake. Just go somewhere else or wait till the traffic clears out. This other issue that we have is the concept of lineup and wait. I heard it again just the other day at Coolidge on Saturday at the pancake fly-in, where somebody said, I'm lining up and waiting on runway 5. This should not be used at a non-towered airport. That's a quotation from it's an ATC function. That's what it is. ATC issues that. So it'd be like me saying cleared for takeoff or cleared to land to an aircraft that's at Casa Grande or Coolidge. It would be the same thing. It's an ATC function. And you'll find it's listed in AC 9173 Bravo, Appendix 1, Paragraph 5, will say, do not expose yourself or do not remain stopped on a runway any longer than necessary. So the lineup and wait is all it's doing is exposing you to more risk by doing that. Bobby, yes.
Yeah, and to follow that point, I probably jumped in too quick, but I think the reasonableness of airmen out there communicating is to communicate your intentions. So if you need to momentarily pause on the runway for whatever reason, maybe you're out there practicing, you're going to simulate a short field takeoff would come to mind. Not creating a risk by being out there longer than possible, but I think pilots want to communicate their intentions concisely and reasonable. And that clarification of using that term, helps delineate the use of it, I think. So.
Right. Well,
anyway,
Paul wrote, quote unquote, taking the runway. One of the things that is, and Steve's got a comment here, our ATC specialist, is people will pull out on the runway in the hopes that the airplane that just landed is either going to do a touch and go or is going to clear the runway. So once again, sometimes it's hard to see what they're doing when it's far enough down the runway, depending on how high you're sitting in your airplane. So we want to make sure that the runway is completely clear before we do that. Steve, you have a comment? What is it that you, Steve is going to be getting involved with me in the ATC stuff. So regarding the term active. Okay, we'll have to come back to him. His speaker isn't working. So once again is the one comment there was taking the runway. One of the issues that we really need to be better at is actually stating the runway. They want us to read it back in the clearances at the towered airports. We should be doing the same thing at the non-towered airports. So if we're going to say taking the runway, we should state runway 5, runway 17, runway 4. We should use the runway number all the time whenever we're stating anything to do with the runway. And then collision avoidance procedures are at their best use under these conditions. We really got to be looking all the way around. Any other questions on, I was pretty quickie on non-towered airport operations, but I brought that up because it's, I found that there's not much training really done other than going down there and showing the student what to do. There's very little ground training, and they're not actually even aware of the advisory circular that gives them a whole lot of help with that. Paul, go ahead.
Thanks. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Oh, okay. I'm having computer troubles. As far as taking the runway, I was taught that you don't take it. And in fact, occasionally you'll hear on the radio a smart aleck say, bring it back, I need to land. So
Yeah.
I was always told departing runway 13, say, hey, departing runway 13, and then actually making a call of departure climb runway 13 on the climb out. So that's what I had been taught.
Well, I would agree with that. Steve, are you up yet? Able to talk yet? No, okay. I would agree, Paul, that that's the way to do it. What we're trying to do with that is get rid of the lineup and wait. That is an ATC function. And anytime you set out there on the runway at a non-towered airport, you're just exposing yourself and asking for trouble. Because once again, not everybody has a radio. Not everybody has to have a radio. And let's face it, some of these aircraft, especially some of the smaller experimentals, light sport, they're tough to see. In the daytime, especially, you may not see that. And next thing you know, you're on the runway waiting for the other one to clear. And they're clearing runway 5. They're not clearing the active. I think that's the other thing Paul wrote in there is state the runway name. So you're clearing runway 5. I know at a place like Casa Grande, there's only, one piece of pavement with 2 numbers. But what we're trying to do is create a habit of saying the same thing, whether we're at an airport with 2 or 3 runways or 1, or working with the tower. Let's see. Okay, I can't consider that. Nope. All right. Steve's not getting his speaker working. Any other comments regarding non-towered airports?
Bill,
Yes, Lee.
a lot of you may know that the Arizona Aviation Safety Advisory Group is making videos for non-towered airports. They're to complement the from the flight deck for towered airports. We have Joe Santoro's support on this. And some of the things that you just discussed are brought up, for instance, in the Marana video. I put the link in the chat, and our next one up is for Sedona.
Okay. Okay. Do you know if they'll be doing any for Achin or Casa Grande or Coolidge?
I'm not sure. Our next project is to make a video about the Class B airspace, but let me jot that down. Achin and which one?
Coolidge and Casa Grande. Those are the 3 main airports that the majority of the schools, especially on the south side, are using, for non-towered airport operations.
I'll bring that up to the video group.
Yeah,
That will be a good thing to aim for.
yeah.
Thank you.
Marana's interesting because it has a crossing runway.
Yes, and the lineup and wait is overused there. We're trying to stop that.
And I don't know, I have no idea how that started. I mean, I know when we changed over from position and hold the lineup and wait, that was a shock to a lot of people. That's actually an ICAO term anyway. We're still behind the 8 ball when it comes to ICAO, like the rest of the world is, in terminology and a lot of procedures, but we're getting there. But for some reason, they just felt that that's what I'm going to say. And it's always been stated in 90-66. AC 90-66. Don't sit out on that runway any longer than you have to. That's where you're just asking for trouble.
Great, yes.
Okay. And then I just got here, yeah, Bobby commenting Wickenburg and Buckeye on the west, on the north side, run into the same issues. Okay, any other input on non-towered airport operations? Okay, flight deck management probably hasn't been touched on if ever, for a very long time. And basically what this is how well are we doing at training and evaluating the requirement to secure all items in the flight deck and cabin. Tow bars, oil cans, backpacks, cleaning supplies. Crawled into some airplanes that were used for flight instruction and check rides and looked in the back, and I couldn't believe how much stuff was back there floating around. And the person I was flying with was totally surprised that I said, you might want to fasten some of that stuff down or run the seat belts through your flight bag or your backpack, and looked at me kind of funny. And I said, well, why would I want you to do that? Do you understand that we just don't want a lot of stuff flying around? So we have charts, iPads, of course. Usually they're on some sort of a mount. Occasionally I've seen them just laying on a seat or just on their lap. And how about the passenger and takeoff briefing, which actually falls under flight deck management? It happens before engine start. From anyone that's listening, where do you instruct, or where do you like to hear the passenger and takeoff briefing done?
Well, being a cheap pilot, I would rather do it without paying the Hobbs meter. So maybe prior to engine start,
Sure,
discuss the
sure.
safety briefing. And, it's a matter of task loading. And, with the engine running, that's one more hazard that is exposing someone.
Exactly. And I've heard the passenger briefing done after the engine was started. And first of all, it's noisy. Yeah, the Hobbs meter's clicking away. But also, if that engine caught on fire, that's kind of, at a moot point at that point, if all that stuff happened before you brief the passengers on that. One other thing for a best practice or a scenario is, I have given the applicant, as we shut the engine down, I said, hey, I see flames coming out of the cowling. And they just look at me and I go, what are you looking at me for? Oh, what? I said, I see flames, smoke coming out of the cowling. Well, what was I looking for? I was looking for when they told me an hour and a half ago what to do if we had a fire or smoke, to see if they're actually aware of the fact that they need to comply with that. So that's where we get into the emergency evacuation. So one of the other things we can do a better job of training and evaluating is the concept of actually giving them a scenario where that spiel they gave you in the beginning of the flight has a reason for being given, and that's to actually come up with a scenario that would cover that.
Hey, Phil,
Yes.
can you hear me?
Yes, I
This
can.
is Jim. So I've never seen this on a check ride, but just thinking back to all the times that I took passengers flying over the years, I would start my briefing inside in the FBO or in the flight school by talking to them a little bit about ramp safety and staying together and that kind of stuff. And then I guess I would do it in pieces, because then there would be other stuff to talk about when we got to the airplane standing outside, and then there would be other stuff to talk about once we got inside. And I tell my applicants, today I'm your passenger. I'm not a pilot. Just treat me like a passenger. And I would love it if they did that with me, actually talk about ramp safety and things before we even walked out.
I think that's a good idea, because that's when you get exposed to a running airplane or even equipment, field trucks and so on and so forth. I think that's a great idea, Jim, to start in there. And also, Paul had sent the standard mnemonic for that, which is safety, SAFETY, given before engine start. So that was his comment on that as well. But I think everything, and including the takeoff briefing, should happen all before the engine start. It just gets a little bit noisy. Now you've got a live airplane that creates another distraction. So I think it's best to do this before. I've had people say they do it just prior to takeoff, and they've done it prior to start. I've actually had some do it while they were taxiing out. Not a really good idea. So once again, I'm just trying to get some sort of a consensus on what we're looking for, what we want to be training for that. Any other comments regarding flight deck management? Okay, engine starting. Hey, is it a good idea to start with a headset on? Don't everybody speak up at once.
Off.
Yeah. Okay. I guess that wasn't interesting enough people. I've had individuals start with their headset on. I'm not so sure that's a good idea. So my next comment there, do we have a contest going on to see who can turn the start key or push the start button the quickest after saying clear? Is there a contest I don't know about? Do we understand, or do our students understand why they're saying that? Do we ever ask them why they're saying that? A lot of them do it just because that's what they were taught. They don't actually understand the concept, and that's easily figured out when they say clear a nanosecond before they turn the key. There are some great procedures that some schools use, or SOPs, I should say. The one I like the best is where clear is stated. The pilot looks left, looks out in the front, looks back to the right, looks to the left one more time, and then turns the key or pushes the button. The other thing that's happening is, no one's probably noticed it, but the new checklists that manufacturers are putting out have you stating the word clear prior to turning the master switch on. Anyone have any idea why that might be a good idea?
Contact with the mag, it could fire.
Well, we had an arrow at my school many years ago that had a short between the master switch and the starter solenoid. And you did not need to turn the key. As soon as you turn the master switch on, the starter rotated. So that was interesting. So we immediately changed all of our checklists to stating clear before the master switch was turned on. But you'll notice in the newer manuals, the newer POHs and AFMs, the Cessna being one of them, that was the first one to start that. You'll hear him say the word clear prior to turning the master switch on. One of the things that we need to spend a little bit more time with is under engine starting, there's only one risk management element. And we're required to test on at least one element over and above what they may have missed on the test, right? So there's only one under engine starting, and that's about propeller safety. So hopefully we're asking every applicant to talk to me about that. What is it you want to do? What don't you want to do? What were you taught about propeller safety? And one of those things is don't use the propeller as a tow bar. The other thing is when the applicants / students are looking at the nose gear, I have to tell you, it makes me uneasy when I see them lean into the propeller to look at the nose gear directly from the front. We had a procedure teaching all of our students to look at it from this side. So they could see everything they needed to see, shimmy dampener, strut extension, all that stuff from the side. Just one of those things that should somebody walk into that airplane while you're out front, push a button, anything happen, you're not in the arc, the propeller arc. So one of the things that we want to add along with that is, are we taking the time to ask them why it's a good idea to do this? As for turning the propeller, I don't really like to touch this one, but there's two schools of thought. One is that mechanics will tell you to turn it opposite the direction that it spins. In other words, as we're facing it, we'd be turning it clockwise from our reference. But then for the airplanes that do have vacuum pumps, that tends to play havoc with the vanes in the vacuum pump. Nowadays, most of the airplanes don't even have those anymore. It would be an issue. So once again, AOPA has a really good handout literature on their propeller safety. It's one of the best ones. It goes far and above what's in the FAA book. They have very little about it in the FAA book. Any questions on that or comments? Okay. So I was asked again to put the operations and systems best practices up here regarding the 5 things we were looking for and a way to test it. without them drawing diagrams on the board. We're not trying to build the airplane. All we're trying to do is see if the pilot knows how to operate it from the switches, dials, and levers they have accessible to them, and what troubleshooting, if any, or abnormal procedures are available to them. So there it is right there. What is it? How's it powered or operated? How can it fail? What indications does the pilot have that it's failed? And what can the pilot do about it? Any comments on that? The other thing that I threw in here, each time I'm going to throw in a bunch of scenarios from different phases of flight. I did a pre-flight before. This one here is taxi. This one here is the takeoff scenarios that you can give them. And once again, these can be, obviously you're not going to do these. These are simulations, but we have an opportunity, even if you're just sitting in the room and you want to cover some scenarios while they're sitting in the room, what their thought process is. You'll find that they are pretty good about giving you that memorized takeoff briefing. When it comes to actually utilizing it or correlating it with a situation on takeoff, tends to be a little bit on the weaker side. So maybe here's an opportunity to ask them, if you lost an engine on this takeoff that we're about to do, while you're still sitting in the room, what would you do? What would you do if you notice low oil pressure shortly after takeoff? These are kind of things that you can do. Obviously, you can still do them in the airplane. You're not going to incorporate many of these, but we have an opportunity to get an idea of what their thought process is. Any comments on that? Okay, Paul has a comment here that says, at 3 different schools, I've had the mechanics tell me to pull the plane from the root of the prop, the meaty part of the outside of the spinner. And by the way, don't ever use a spinner. That's been common with everything I've read. Those spinners are not stressed for that. They're actually very weak components. And not use the tow bar for pulling or pushing. I don't agree with that one. That's what the tow bar is for. I find it odd that they would that the mechanics would say, or that the schools would do that. But any other comments on what Paul wrote there?
Well, a good tow bar is expensive, but it's even more expensive to have a little tractor you can pull it out with. But pulling by the propeller is not safe, and it's hard on especially on a variable pitch prop or a constant speed propeller. You're putting pressure on it that it's not designed for. Not that it's going to cause anything to break right away, but it's better to find a way of doing it that you're comfortable with and is not going to damage the aircraft.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And
so just make sure you have a good tow bar. I mean, personally, the only time I ever pull an airplane out of the hangar by myself, I'm on a tractor. So
yeah,
I've got 3 or 4 people pushing on the wings, but we don't use the propeller to pull the airplane in and out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the case, I don't know if it showed up there, but that was Ernie from the FAA, our maintenance individual that was speaking to that. I can tell you that there just isn't a lot of propeller safety taught very much in the training programs, just about everywhere that I've worked with. There was just very little taught about what to do and don't do with propellers. I would like to see that be a little bit more of a emphasized area, given the fact that it is an element in the engine starting area of operation, and there's only one risk management question regarding it, and that's propeller safety, which is a pretty wide range. But as I said, go ahead.
One of the things that we've always taught, or I've always taught my mechanics, is that you act as if the propeller is always running, and you never move when you're in the vicinity of the propeller until you know what your location is relative to the propeller. In other words, look at the propeller before you move.
Mm-hmm.
a lot of times we'll be working within an inch or two of that propeller while the engine's running. And I've seen mechanics lose tools. I've seen mechanics get injured by the propeller. Fortunately, I've never seen anybody die, although I've heard about it. But we just act like that propeller is running as long as the engine is together and there's the possibility of it starting. We act like it's running.
Right. And I don't know how many of us remember the individual down at Casa Grande in the middle of the night that got out of his airplane with the engine running to check something. And he approached the airplane directly from the front. And of course, propeller caught him. He wasn't found till the next morning. And I think, if I can remember correctly, the airplane was actually still idling. This is why I'm a huge proponent of looking at anything down in that nose gear from the side. You can see everything you need to see if you approach it from the side.
And there was also that model that lost her arm because she wanted to walk back and thank the pilot for taking her.
Yes, I personally saw at Key West many years ago, back in the 70s. I saw, it was unfortunate as well. It was a probably a boyfriend and girlfriend, and she did get nicked with a propeller. He did one of those clears and hit the key. And this was it comes up with me a lot because I watched that happen. He hit the key a nanosecond after he said clear. She actually was trying to jump out of the way, but it got her. It did not kill her, but it got her arm and took it off. But if you've ever seen something like that, you probably think more along the lines of way I think with this stuff with propeller safety. But I just hope maybe we can do a little bit better job from all aspects, the instruction and the evaluation of making sure that's covered very well. Ernie, on the prop tips, the painting on the prop tips, is that a requirement to have the word I'm looking for is I can't remember what it is, but where the prop tips are painted like
It's like a placard. Is it like a placard requirement
right.
for safety? Yeah.
It varies from propeller manufacturer to manufacturer. Cincinnati puts them on some aircraft and they don't on others. The only way to really know is to go to the propeller manual and see what the requirements are for epoxy in that propeller.
Okay.
That's generally done by a prop shop. Ooh, I was just talking about this with someone else a few days ago, but removing paint or painting anything other than the face of the prop, which is the back, painting anything other than the face of the prop is major repair, has to be done by prop shop. Polishing propeller is a no-no.
Right. Right.
But
So
like cinch props,
the
that
black-
cinch decal is placed at a specific point and is attached in a specific way, and that's why you have to have a prop shop do it.
Mhm. So the black mat on the back of the propeller, that needs to be done by a prop shop. So
No, you can do it. You can do the back. You can do, that's called the face. And
face, that's right, blade face, right? Okay.
you can apply the black to the face. That's the only thing. That's a minor repair. Just like cleaning the leading edge is a minor repair.
But once again, that has to be an A&P, not a pilot.
That's correct.
That was what I was getting at. I started this ask the question wrong. So that doesn't fall under preventive maintenance. So the owner cannot, unless he's an A&P, sand that thing down and paint that.
Right.
Okay, that's what I was getting at. Okay, and Ernie, sorry for the late notice on this. I thought it must have dropped you out of the CC. Did we find out anything on the replacement of the airworthiness certificates?
I'm thinking. Go on to the next one and I'll look and see what I got.
I have a couple of things to add to the takeoff on muddy.
Yes.
Yeah, I disagree with landing or taking off on muddy surfaces in that my front wheel was throwing mud right into the prop, chewed off some parts of the prop.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, that's not a good idea. Plus, whenever the engine is started, I always ask the applicant, what would you do if somebody was walking towards you from the front? Right now, what do you want to do? Well, I turned off the engine.
Mhm.
Yeah, you don't want, yeah, you don't want anybody walking into your prop.
No, I've had that happen a few times where I just had to pull the mixture out.
Yeah.
Because I didn't know what they were gonna do, even though they may have been 10 feet away. They're not even looking at me.
Yeah.
I don't, that just, once again, I saw something happen in 1976 when I was a brand new charter pilot, and it stuck with me for a very, very long time. Now, in regards to the muddy snow covered, see, Lee, that's an opportunity right there for them to tell you they wouldn't take off under those conditions. So part of these scenarios is not necessarily how would you do this? Would you even do it in the first place? So that's a good point. Any other comments on what we've done so far? Okay. So chapter 9 is a supplemental section of the AFM's POHs. On the aircraft that don't have a POH or an AFM, as we discussed a few months ago, what those actually were, that were a part of that aircraft when it left the factory. If you put, say you put a Garmin 430 in an airplane didn't have one, it's going to have some paperwork associated with it, and it's going to have what they call an airplane flight manual supplement. So there may not be a manual to put that Garmin data in that comes with it. Simply, it has to be on board the airplane. It must be carried on board the airplane in the airplane flight manual. In those cases, you just take the document and put it in the glove box or a seat back pocket, because not every airplane, as we discussed, had its own fancy AFM or POH. But I noticed that in the training that I've been doing with the CFIs, hardly anybody was ever exposed to or shown chapter 9 of the AFMs. Chapter 9 actually has normal procedures, emergency procedures, and limitations in it that you would think would be in chapter 3 or 4 further up in the book. But because this is supplemental data, they don't have inserts for the earlier portion of the book for chapter 3 and 4. So there is actually required data that needs to be accessible by the pilot regarding something that may have been installed in that airplane, including actually normal procedures. If you put a autopilot in an airplane that didn't have one before, that supplement will have the manner in which you test that autopilot, not as an emergency procedure, but as a normal procedure. So on both sides of the coin here, both the instructors and the examiners, we want to spend a little bit of time with that section and make sure that they understand there is more data beyond chapter 7, which is the descriptions of the systems. Chapter 8 is servicing and handling, cleaning windows, airing tires up, so on and so forth, which is also information they need to know, especially if they're the owner of the aircraft. That's stuff that's not necessarily preventive maintenance stuff. But just take a little bit of time, and here's some of the stuff that is in there. It'll have operation and limitations of equipment that's installed at the factory, as well as added after it left the factory. So I'm looking at my Cessna 172S manual here, and it has a supplemental section of stuff that was on the airplane when it left the factory, but it was not considered part of a basic airplane. So it was extra stuff, optional equipment, and they put that in the back there in chapter 9. So once again, as I mentioned, an autopilot's limitations, what are the minimum engagement altitudes for takeoff and landing? I'll ask this on both a VFR, a private or commercial, an instrument test. When there's a working autopilot on the airplane, they're supposed to know how to use it. And there is a limitation on autopilots for when it can be engaged after takeoff and when it has to be turned off prior to landing. And it's sometimes a deer in the headlights look when I ask them that, and they say, well, I don't know. I just always did this, this, and this. So once again, both the flight schools, instructors, and examiners, we need to spend a little bit of time with chapter 9 so that they understand that there is actually limitations, normal and emergency procedures in chapter 9 for the equipment on that aircraft. Okay. It'll also tell you how to test some items need to go through a certain test. It also will tell you the certification requirements for installed or added equipment. A lot of times those are what we call TSOs, for equipment? Does it, how does it get certified? It's certified under TSO, which is a popular number trying to figure out what your GPS can and can't do. And then, as I said, their emergency procedures and normal procedures are in there as well. So touch and goes. This came up on a test that you guys just took. And I've been making my opinion known about doing touch and goes on a test. I personally don't think it's fair to the applicant. Each landing and takeoff has a beginning and an end. It's kind of hard to do when you're doing a touch and go. It's hard to do a short field takeoff that's resulting from a touch and go or a soft field takeoff. And this is right here, right off the test you guys just took. It says there's no FAA testing or reference document that prescribes that maneuver. I know it's a time saver, but what we're really looking for is the accomplishment of all the elements of each one of the tasks. Any questions on that?
What document is that, or what presentation was that from, Phil? Am I behind on my training?
The test you guys just took. Bobby?
Phil, I can, yeah, that's those of you, or those of us that will be taking the 2-year Oklahoma City sponsored DPE recurrent. This is part of their phase 2, if you will. You take an online course, a lot of reading involved with the 8900, et cetera. And then this is part of their presentation. And I have to say, in all the years that we've been attending these, this is probably the best they've done. The presenters are spectacular. The content's very apropos, and they're making a concerted effort to standardize practices and to engage us DPEs in just being very familiar with all of our guidance reference materials, and also tightening up and trying to standardize the use of plans of action. So I have to say, it's the best one that I've attended. And Phil and I had just been talking about a couple of techniques, procedures, and this came up in conversation. So I offered this slide.
Very good. Well, I'm registered in April, so I'll look forward to that. So I understand the arguments on both sides of the touch and goes thing. Is the FAA drawing a line in the sand and making it clear that thou shalt not do touch and goes on check rides?
That is correct.
Good to know.
Thanks, Bobby. Okay.
Well,
Jim.
there's a caveat.
Yeah.
May I share a caveat? If you go to the ATP ACS, if you go to Appendix 7, there are some rules of engagements listed in safety and practices. So touch and goes have been used in industry for a long, long time. But I did ask the direct question and got the direct answer that for the private and commercial flight instructor, that there is no directed references for touch and goes to be a part of a measured element in any practical test. After the fact, I went out and started looking, just because the touch and go being used is something that I know a lot of people use. I don't, but the ATP ACS actually uses reference to touch and goes, but not as directed reference. It infers that they probably are being used. But the folks in Oak City and the local FSDOs are discouraging the use of touch and goes because, again, a touch and go leaves out the beginning and ending elements of either a takeoff or a landing.
Question, Bobby, did anyone ask about stop and goes? Doesn't work for every scenario, but because I know, like on the soft field, you want to have the entering and exiting the runway, but in some scenarios, maybe like the slip to landing followed by a normal takeoff. Did anyone ask about whether it's okay to do a stop and go?
Yeah, and that's been talked about, Jim, and forgive me for not being more clear. So a stop and go so an approach to landing to a full stop is a landing. And then from a full stop to a takeoff, whether you wanted to demonstrate and, maybe give a scenario where you've got a short runway, you have a shortened runway. The applicant says, well, if it's a shortened runway, I'm going to demonstrate short field landing technique. So you come to a stop and then say, all right, well, this was on a a soft field, or from this position, let's demonstrate the soft tilt takeoff, or you say, all right, the rest of this runway is grass. I don't know. But,
Gotcha.
trying to get the applicants to make decisions from the story that you're building or the canvas that you're getting them to paint, I think is the whole goal behind this. Instead of, they're wanting us to get away from saying, okay, just do this, do this, do this, but let you see into the pilot's head as to how they would conduct themselves based on the environment that they're given to operate in.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, so Jim, what I characteristically did was a short field approach to a landing, to a full stop, assuming I have, a place like Gateway or something like that, to a full stop, and then I did the normal takeoff. That's what I did at that point. So because the short field still, he still had to demonstrate that he used all available runway. So if you really let him taxi out onto the beginning of the runway, you're getting to see if he lines up. If he takes 200 feet to get himself lined up, he didn't meet the criteria. He didn't use all available runway. It took him 200 feet to get it lined up on the center line. So if you do the normal or the landing of short field landing and then pick it up from there, that's better than a touch and go. You could say, okay, tell me where the end of the runway is. Well, it's right here, and I'm going to use as much as I can of this. But the whole idea with that short field takeoff, of course, was that he used all available runway. So the examiner would have to make something up instead of using the actual piece of pavement to see if the applicant really did use all available runway. How good was he or she at lining the airplane up with a minimum amount of wasted asphalt behind it? But the whole idea, I've never had problems with stop and goes at all, because you can do what you need to do with two of the events. You got everything covered. So that was never an issue, but it was the touch and goes. This person has trouble maintaining directional control on a touch and go. They're trying to clean up the airplane. It's a lot of work. Matter of fact, some places and some airplanes will not allow touch and goes in their aircraft, period. For a lot of places with Arrows and Seminoles, anything with a retractable gear, the touch and go was pretty much a no-no, but they wanted you to stop the airplane, get it back around and take off again. Plus, the other thing it does is it gives you more than one shot to look at what they can do when they leave the runway. Did they do an after takeoff? Are they maintaining directional control? Are they able to talk to the tower? Are they picking the right time to do the after landing flow / items? Are they doing it while they're turning off the runway? Well, that's not a good idea either. So we get to see a lot of things when we have them stop and turn around. And then it shouldn't be a race to see how quickly we can get this done. And if you ask a lot of them, they'll tell you they really appreciate being able to stop, catch their breath, and turn around and go back out again. We sometimes forget the anxiety that they're under. And here they are, pushing the power in, getting the carb heat in, getting the flaps up. It's a lot of stuff that's just not on our list of items to check, nor is it a good idea, period. So I was glad to finally see this come out this way. I know that the feds have been not really pro touch and goes, and a lot of places, a lot of schools just absolutely will not allow them. So, which is fine. But any other questions on that? Comments? Nope. Okay. Jim, go for it.
All right, so you've got screen sharing disabled. It might be easier if you want to just click the link that I just put in the chat, Phil, and then you'll have to stop share, and then you can share your browser.
Okay.
Just show people what that
Okay.
link is.
All right.
For anyone, yeah, you'll have to, there you go, and then do a new share and just share your browser.
Got it.
This is just a static page. If I was thinking ahead, I would have just sent you a screenshot to put in your PowerPoint. I apologize. So for anyone watching the recording, we'll put the link in the description. I will put the link.
Is it up there? Are you guys looking at it?
No, No, we see your PowerPoint not running is what we're still looking at.
Okay,
So
let me try it
thank you.
again. New share, I got it. Okay, I think
There you
I
go.
got it now, so. It just took a minute for it to come up.
There we go. All right. So Phil and I got together and figured out a way with Zoom to create this meeting registration page. And some of the nice things about doing it this way, first of all, you can register for every DPE meeting for the rest of the year. These meetings, we took off April and December, expecting FA training in April and holidays in December. So right there, you can check all the boxes and go ahead and put in your information and register. This will also allow Phil to see who is registered for each meeting, and it will send you a personal email, and it even has the option to add it to your own calendar. So this should prevent what we saw today. I know there's at least a couple people that had trouble getting the link for today. Apologize for that, but and this way Phil doesn't have to create a meeting every month and hope that the right people get the right link and all that kind of stuff. The only downside that we anticipate, if it even is a downside, is Zoom requires you to register your own account to use this feature. You can see that banner right at the top. It's free. There's no reason for someone to not do it. No good reason that I can think of. So if you have not yet had a reason to create your own Zoom account, just click that sign up free button at the top, put in your email address and register. Just know that you know, this is kind of a one-time thing for the rest of the year, but come the end of this year, when we add the ones for next year and it's time to register again, just know that you have to put in the email address that you use to register for Zoom. Does anyone have any questions about that? Oh,
Yeah, Jim,
real quick, you can't really see it on his Apple browser, what are you in Safari, but when you go to the shortcut link that I put in the chat or put in the description of this YouTube video, that's just a tiny URL short link and it goes to a longer Zoom link. You can also bookmark that page if you want to keep track of this to come back in the future. So go ahead, Bobby.
Yeah, sorry about that. The registration process, we can literally do that up to the last minute, right? It's not a matter of quantity. It's just allows us into the meeting and we can, like you said, pre-assign ourselves this as far out as we have meetings scheduled. Is that correct? So if I was running late and hadn't registered, I could register that, 20 minutes before the meeting and still be able to get in. Is that right? Or is there an alternative method if we use registration?
I'm confident that you can do this right up until the meeting starts. I will go back in and look at the settings. I will tell you that when I first put this together, the February meeting was on the list. And when I pulled this up at the beginning of the meeting today, it was automatically gone. So you could find yourself in trouble. Well, I don't even know if it's a different link each time. I don't know. Like if you registered for the March meeting now, would that work to get on right now? I don't know. I'll look at the settings again.
Jim, didn't you delete that February meeting? Because I said I was going to send out. Oh,
It
okay.
went away automatically.
Ah, okay. Got it.
This is Neil. I do a meeting monthly with one of my professional associations that I'm president of. And I just set up a Zoom meeting, and in Zoom, for however long I say to do it, which is like 2 years. And we send it to them. There's not check boxes for each meeting. And it's the same login, and you send it to everybody and they put it on their calendar and it's there. It's not very complicated to set up a Zoom meeting that's a recurring one. It's really very simple.
Yeah, that was another option we looked at. We decided to go with this one, and we can change this if people don't like it for some reason, but this allows people to select, if they know certain months that they're going to be available or certain months that they're not, they can just register all at once. So anyway, we'll try it and send any feedback to Phil or your point of contact, a point of contact.
Okay, thanks, Jim. There we go. Let's see here. Oh, yeah. I was going to do a lesson or a dissertation on radio phraseology. I was talking with Steve Wilo. She's once again the ATC guy. Is going to be working with me on this. But one of the things I did want to bring up is we're hearing a lot of, instead of saying 4,500, we're saying 4.5 or 5.5. I don't know where that started, where it came from, but in our efforts during training and evaluating, if we could try to get the radio phraseology, at least from that standpoint, figured out to where we're talking, we're saying just.
I'm pretty sure it's the same person that taught us to say you're on guard.
Oh, is it? Okay, well, there you go. Huh. So and once again, the referencing the AIM. What I'm going to do for March is I'm going to spend a little bit of time with Steve and probably Jim as well, and create a presentation that I think should work for both the instructors, freelance school instructors, and the examiners. So we're getting better at being on the same page for things like calling yourself Skylane 1921 Mike instead of Cessna, things like that, using make and model, just like it states in the book. But that's what's going to be coming the next month. So if anybody wants to get ahead of the program and just take a look at radio phraseology, come up with any questions you have, and send them my way, that'd be great. Okay, point of contact reports, and then I'm going to open it up to the FSDO and the guests, and any other comments from the group there. Jared says he couldn't make it, but he didn't have anything to comment on. Kim, are you still there?
Hi, yep.
There you are. Okay, do you have anything from the Tucson area?
I don't, not this week.
Okay, all right. Bill Scott is our Scottsdale gentleman. Bill's been pretty busy with IOE and stuff, training at United. So what I'm going to do is solicit anybody that may want to be the Scottsdale point of contact, because Bill's not really much going to be able to do it. Is there anyone or that might be willing to volunteer to be the Scottsdale point of contact? Or think about it. I'll put a letter out there so that everybody gets it, requesting a volunteer for that. Jim, you have anything from Deer Valley? And Jim is also going to be taking over Goodyear, since United Aviate moved out that way from Westwind's older operation.
So Deer Valley, I think we mentioned it last time, but worth repeating. A lot of construction happening on the ramp west of the Cutter facilities there on the south side of the airport. Use caution around ramp 3, and they have it fenced off pretty well, but maybe some extra vehicles and construction crews around. And other than that, it's definitely slowed down quite a bit at Deer Valley. I don't know the recent traffic numbers. It'll be interesting to see how the totals work out with Westwind leaving. But I mean, they're still technically there. They're just finishing up a handful of students. But things are up and running at Goodyear for United Aviate. You guys have probably seen it in the news. They've been getting a lot of publicity, and the new students are going to start check rides here in the next few days. And they are all set with 30 new people every month, and taking 2.5 to 3 months to get to their private. So here in the next 2, 3, 4 months, we're going to start seeing a lot more activity out of Goodyear as far as check rides and whatnot. So use caution when over there. A lot of new activity.
Thanks. Todd, are you up? I don't think so. I didn't see him on there. Brian couldn't make it. He didn't have anything to report from Falcon or the West Valley, just a little bit of construction, but nothing of any consequence.
Hey, Phil, this is Neil.
Yes.
Jim, with them moving out there to Goodyear, how much weekend, or are they going to be doing instruction on weekends also?
Don't know.
My concern, Phil, is, the conversations we've had with the different towers and the balloons flying and staying clear of areas, and that will be, how much is this going to change?
I will. I'm actually heading out there in a couple days to check out the facility and be part of a presentation. So I will make a note and let you know.
Yeah, there's not a lot of balloon traffic out there normally, but that is an area I fly a lot, and we will fly towards Goodyear, but I typically try not to cross it if I have to.
Okay.
But
The standing topics, any issues and problems? Actually, I'm going to go through all this stuff here. Procedural, nothing. Technical, anything with the airspace that anyone knows of? Jim, anything? With the AFTW?
Yeah, actually, thanks for reminding me. It's still, I'm not even sure I'm caught up on the recent emails that are going around, but apparently this last revision, was it last Thursday, of FAA instrument approach procedures, what was it, runway 5 at Coolidge, significantly changed the instrument approach procedure. And I don't even know if I'm talking about the right approach, but anyway, whatever was related to the other stack that the AFTW created for the approach into Coolidge, that has been hopefully temporarily removed from the AFTW website because the current approach procedure does not match it anymore. And not sure why it happened. Stay tuned for more information, but we'll be working on that from the AFTW.
Okay. I don't have anything from the professional side. Any feedback from the schools or instructors that might be on? That was given to any DPEs either? No. There's no mentoring going on at this part. Let me go right past the committees here. Jim just gave us the AFTW stuff. Anything, Craig, from FAST?
Yeah, I got a couple of things here. Just kind of an announcement. 18th through the 20th is the Buckeye Airfare, and then moving on past that, we've got the RSAT for Goodyear. Speaking of Goodyear, on March 23rd. So, ideally about a month ahead of that, hopefully we'll get a pilot controller forum lined up. And I think that's all I'm seeing. Ernie, you got anything?
I have a barking dog. No, I did post 2 YouTubes links in the comments concerning getting airworthiness certification and getting a special flight permit or airfare permit.
Yes, I got those. Thanks.
Okay.
Okay. Any other programs coming up? Awards programs, anything like that? No. Okay. Any questions or comments from the DPEs overall? Okay, any questions or comments from the guests? Neil, you did have something about the balloon thing we talked about the other day.
yeah,
Are you still there? Yeah, let's run through that, and then my last thing is going to be the comments from the FSDO over and above what they just mentioned.
okay, so I ran into something the other day. I was up getting an annual inspection, and a guy came up to me, wants to become a balloon pilot. He's got his multi-engine ATP, came over from the military, so that's all he has for civilian, and he's not current, doesn't have a current flight review. And so in going around with the or having discussions with the FSDO, he got a letter of legal interpretation that had been written for somebody else previously, that basically said if a pilot or a person with a pilot certificate other than a student wants to solo, going for a new rating, they have to have a current flight review, be within that 2-year time frame. Otherwise, they can't do it. And so, the choice for him is either surrender his ATP and start over, or go out and get current for his ATP multi-engine, which is what he's choosing to do, and is starting to work on that. But it's something that, at least from the balloon world, we hadn't been thinking about checking people coming over with, other pilot ratings and trying to come to Balloon to ensure that they were current with their, flight reviews in order to be able to do the solos that they need.
Okay. Thanks.
Yep.
Okay, FISDO gentlemen, anything else that you guys want to cover?
Nothing here.
Okay, I do have one question. Is the Oak City meeting this year in April of the Zoom meeting? Or was that last year?
I thought
That
we
was
did
in
that last year.
2020 when we,
Yeah, I'm trying to find out if because I'm not involved in getting that information anymore, so.
Are you talking about the paid training that we're required to do every 2 years?
Yeah, the one that Oak City of course used to do in person, but now we're doing it by Zoom.
So April 12th is when I'm registered for.
Okay,
that was back in 2020 when we did that, I thought. That was during COVID.
Yeah,
Right after
so,
COVID started up, wasn't it?
so this is 2 years, April 2022.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah, I just did mine. So.
okay. All right, you guys did your online stuff, but is Oak City doing a Zoom presentation over and above what was done, taking the test, reading the documents and taking the test?
Yeah, it's a part 1, part 2. So what Bobby went through is the part 1, and then there's a part 2 recurrent training as well.
Okay, and that's the
Yeah,
one
and
that had.
I just attended that. That's what I was saying. I did the part 1, and then I just attended last week the part 2, and they're just, from what I could gather, when I sent the lady at AFS the email, she said they're just putting out standard blanket every other week 2-year recurrence for the DPEs across the country. They're not, from what I gathered, and the reason I signed up for the one I signed up for was that they weren't doing FISDO specific 2-year ventures. It's just every DPE for himself to meet that 2-year requirement for, being managed in your local FISDO was the way I understood it. And I could have gotten that wrong.
Yeah, I was asking because I've gotten some phone calls from individuals that want to know, how it's working this year. And of course, I don't have any way to even access the test or anything. So I just was going to find out if there's anything I could tell them, but of course I'll just, send them.
Yeah, in years past, if you would.
What's that?
Oh, sorry to talk over you. Yeah, in years past, if you went to their enrollments or what was being offered, they would offer them regionally, and our FISDO, Scottsdale FISDO, was part of that. We're going to be in Scottsdale. 2 years ago during COVID, they said, well, we're going to conduct we're going to host for Scottsdale's DPEs the 2-year recurrent. They've changed that from what I can see. If you go to the enrollments page and see what you can schedule yourself for, they're not listing them regionally. It's just everything is being sponsored out of Oak City, and each individual DPE spends their $240 and enrolls for a particular date that fits your schedule.
Sure.
And that's
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to get that on there so everybody knew what was going on. I figured they just would end up calling their MS anyway. Okay, any other comments from anyone? All right, thanks for attending, y'all. Next meeting will be March 8th, 2022. As I said, a heads up on radio phraseology, looking at that task and what is it we're really looking for and what works and what doesn't work. You can reach me at phil.remmel@gmail.com, plus the DPEG email is AZDPEAG@gmail.com. So thanks, y'all. Any other questions, comments?
Thank you, Phil.
All right.
Yeah,
Bye-bye.
thanks, Phil. Great job.
You
Phil,
bet.
thank
Thanks.
you.
Bye.